virtues of classical Greek philosophy. So, even step one, if we are to interpret that as acceptance or admittance of our powerlessness over our addiction. Step two, about courage and trusting to believe. Step three, about letting go and knowing what is not and what is in our control. And step four, dealing with our grudges and resentments. And then we have a pretty stoic start to the program. To start and truly admit that one has an addiction problem leaves no time for half measures. And as AA says, but a necessity to grasp the nettle and go full steam ahead in our thinking, feeling, and behavioral changes. Following nature or God's will for us, here we see Buddhist links also of severing all unhealthy attachments and being, as the Gestalt psychologists emphasize, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I was a psychologist researching attachment theory for a while at UCL, and it was crucial for me to see, when working later as a clinician or seeing sponsors, how they worked, that how important security was within the fellowship. A secure base or a sound attachment is, for psychological well-being, very important, and based on ethological studies and mother-infant research, attachment research in its magnitude now does emphasize the crucial need for infants to have a good quality relationship from day one with his or her primary caregiver, usually the mother. I think crucial, it's not crucial, but it's important. I think Thomas Insel, a neurobiologist and psychiatrist, and who was actually head of mental health in the United States of America, which is quite a challenge, wrote a paper saying social needs from an evolutionary perspective can activate the same areas of the brain that trigger addictive processes in the dopamine systems of the brain. I'm grossly simplifying the neuroscience here, but it does seem to make sense that actually going to meetings, meeting people, and internalizing a lot of the goodness that one does come across in the 12-step meetings is very, very similar in a way to what was being talked about by Thomas Insel to replace the addiction. Yet, despite our need for security and safety, we do need to internalize these objects as psychoanalysis refers to them, and hence allow them to strengthen our character by allowing ourselves to be conscious of them and to keep working on what comes up from the unconscious, a term I have to emphasize not used by the Stoics, and when made conscious to work on them, as in steps 6 and 7, encouraging regular work on one's own shortcomings and character defects, moral flaws, inflated personality traits, whatever one wants to call them. So in recovery, therapists, sponsors, peer groups, friends, family, they all do that job if they're in recovery or in good psychological shape, so to speak, to allow for internalization for a self-sufficiency. But I do emphasize not a controlling or self-will run riot attitude, as AA says. I believe we need willpower to get to work, weddings, funerals, and meetings, etc. But self-will is about the opposite of acceptance and the need to be always right, seeing things in black or white, love or hate, and all or nothing. Now, it is that we need to take now a look from the skeptical side to think reflectively and calmly that leads me to the other Greek school, which I'll briefly talk about, which will help us tremendously to avoid falling, I hope, into the all or nothing trap. Now, the skeptics were founded by Paro of Elis in 360 to 270 BC. Like Socrates, nothing was written down, but fragments have remained, and it is has much in common with Buddhist thought. Paro accompanied Alexander the Great to the east, and it's his contact with the Indian wise men where he said he learnt a lot of the skepticism. The main skeptic is Sextus Empiricus, and in his outline of skepticism, he wrote that skeptics are philanthropic and wish to cure by argument, as far as they can, the conceit and rashness of the dogmatists. So at the beginning of his book, Empiricus wrote that he hopes skepticism would attain ataraxia, and by ataraxia he means tranquility. Peace of mind, resolution of mental conflict, everything in the 12 steps, and resolution of pain is the goal, while the cause of conflict is the deep human tendency to be attached to dogmatic beliefs which lead to conceit and rashness. The cure is through the logos, that is, through discussion and argument. According to Freud, for example, he wanted us to be, perhaps to be a slave to our neurosis, and with the help of the psychoanalyst, once learns to confront one's slavery, and then one is free to confront reality. In other words, Freud tried to provide a scientific method and reduce everything to cause and effect, an example being the Oedipus complex, which Freud saw not as a universal, which Freud saw as a universal development and stage all boys went through, although Freud was later reminded about the fact that girls existed. But it was only, and many of Freud's ideas were very fixed and set in concrete, that this opened a door for many great colleagues such as Jung and Adler to take forward their ideas, which were far more open-minded, even though not less impressive. Now, what I'm saying is here that there has been, and still is, quite a difficulty in mental health at the moment in a lot of the different treatments, whether it's psychopharmacology and whether it's psychotherapy, in a very, very strong theoretical basis. And people are getting more and more bogged down in theory. And this is very much what the skeptics were against. They definitely believed in, I think, what the 12 steps do, and is very much being open-minded and not saying that we have the answer. Well, of course, anyone here knows that this is not possible, and that human beings are far too diverse and complex, and let alone our genetics and social environment, for there to be one model to fit all. So the skeptics I'm always attracted to, because as far as the program goes, AA has sometimes been accused of being rather rigid and dogmatic. But I believe the accusation is false and very different from theoretical models in psychiatry, clinical psychology, and a lot of the psychotherapies. Eclectic, integrative models are being more and more common, more and more encouraged and common now, and those trained in hardcore theoretical models are beginning to see the world as larger and more complex. Instead of looking for causes, the skeptics would probably look for reasons. But to a skeptic, dogmatic beliefs, such as a rational approach to a problem, or just a rational approach to a problem, looking at just processing feelings, or believing in the unconscious will always consist of repressed memories and instincts, ignores what the skeptics call just ordinary day-to-day phenomena, such as spontaneity, creativity, decisions, open-mindedness, honesty, and willingness. And in AA, we do find some people who do like to take control, part of their personality, and that part of the thing is that AA, as someone once said to me, you know, is full of people from all different backgrounds, creeds, religions, races, and the principles of the 12 steps can come across from some people as very firm, rigid, and punishing. But some of these, and there are few on the whole, but still important examples, will be seen as a sponsor perhaps interfering with medical matters, as I once found out a sponsor sacked his sponsee because he was taking antidepressants. "You're using drugs," he said. And then later on I've heard other ones, "You forgot to pray this morning. God will take note and you'll probably drink again." Another one was, "Treatment centers and psychotherapy are dangerous. All you need is AA. You must, you ought, you should," and so on. This calls for a sweep of the skeptics. The skeptic has no beliefs about what is non-evident, about how things really are, the dogmatic craving for security of belief as necessary, and even sufficient condition for tranquility of soul strikes the skeptic as both futile and harmful. And some of the late great philosophers are happy to call themselves skeptics, such as David Hume, Montaigne, Heidegger, Wittgenstein, and so on. Skepticism, I think, is best described as a form of rational justification rooted in the life world, and he is thereby compelled to suspend judgment on all topics other than those which come to us as natural evidence. So I always like that. I think just it says that in, I think it's in step 10, if you're sending an email or you regret, or a telephone call, or you're just about to do something you're not sure, it says something in step 10 about restraint of tongue and pen. And I think that's very much like the skeptic thing of take a few steps back and suspend judgment. I think that's what skepticism is all about. So instead of telling the addict he is wrong, or that AA is always right and the steps are the only way and you must do 500 meetings a year, the AA messenger could develop very differently from the dogmatic one. Instead of trying to increase his mental mechanisms, the unconscious, God's existence, making amends to every person he says is proper and not the sponsee, instead he can just pass the message, not the addict, show that the program is one of progress, not perfection, and one of attraction, not promotion. And it is a self-help support group, not a sect or a cult, as everybody is voted for, and there are no leaders. He or she can both decide whether to put their faith in dogma, and whether it will give them security. But it will be a full sense of security, and can promote a dislike of the meetings and steps, instead of allowing people to be skeptical, yet also, I believe, stoic at the same time, to allow themselves to grow in reason and spirit with freedom rather than coercion, techniques, theories, or other people telling them what to do. So, just to finish, AA is a free and open organization, and I think it is with that spirit that I saw the possibility for healing from Greek, and the ancient Greek philosophy was very similar, and from some of people, helping people from some of the most dreaded circumstances AA has been responsible for. My lecture has definitely gone on too long, and I pray it has not been too philosophical, because I'm not a philosopher. So please don't ask me any philosophical questions. But my intention was to pass on just a basic, fun, I hope, message that the brilliant ideas and way of practicing spiritual exercises, and in this lecture the unique ones of AA, are actually as old as the hills, be it Buddha or be it Epictetus. Whether or not Bill W. or Dr. Bob had a classical education is something I don't know about. But what is certain is that the ancient Greeks and later philosophers, right up to Wittgenstein and Heidegger in the 20th century, whom promoted better ways to live, and following that path, one constantly finds out endless similarities to the meaning of the 12 steps. And also reassurance that within the AA program, contrary to often criticisms in the press, there is little room for more and only gigantic admiration for the group of amateur and armchair philosophers who have provided a spiritual program that has saved and improved the lives of literally millions of suffering human beings. And that is indeed quite a feat. Thank you very much.